edge,
Yes.
over the edge, and I like, okay, I'm gonna go right back here into the sweet, delicious spot.
Yes. Yes. Don't mind me, I'm just sitting over here feeling very aroused.
Right? Yeah.
Swimming in our deliciousness.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
And pulling back just a tad. Oh. I'm noticing compared to recording with Jeffrey and Cody that I can feel you more.
Oh, okay.
I don't feel so much of a need to maintain the eye contact, to maintain the connection.
Yeah. It is really cool when you're able to be able to show up and both like simultaneously have the space holder and the recipient role. It's like it's simultaneously happening at the same time, right? So like even though it's your podcast and you're holding and creating the container, there's also things that you're meant to receive by being the facilitator and the creator of the podcast, right? Like you are also meant to receive transmissions and experiences and insights, right? And so I think that that's what's really cool about then have someone like me coming in, which totally honors and respects and understands your role. But at the same time, I do feel so confident in being able to hold my own space. And I think that's where it comes from. It's like my own knowing of self, that I can hold myself, and holding myself, I can hold any space that I'm in as well. And not by like coming in and like taking over and like, oh, this is my space. But it's just like, no, I know that I am whole and I can hold my own. And in this space, I can also hold space with another person. Right. And so in that, we're together, like holding space together and then both receiving. And it becomes like this giving and receiving kind of energy. You know, at least that's what's channeling in right now.
Yes. Oh. I'm soaking that in. I saw 2 clients today, and I finally got enough negative feedback to listen to the small and still significant part of myself that's been like, yeah, so all of your friends who facilitate, they seem to have these like routines and containers, like they seem to like have a thing that like a ritual, right? Like a routine that they do, like a thing to create the container, and I don't really see you doing that so much. And I'm like, fuck you, like I know what I'm doing, like leave me alone. I just go with the flow and it's working. With you know, relative to the positive feedback, very little negative feedback. And yesterday it got pointy enough, that negative feedback got pointy enough that I was like, okay, yes, I hear. And what I added in today was simple. It's things I could have been doing for months, for years, most of it. Just taking the time to sit, to drop in, to set intentions, to share desires, to speak to boundaries, incorporating my singing bowl and a couple different kinds of sage and Palo Santo, and having the time, both at the beginning and at the end, one part of the negative feedback I received has been continuing to go over time with my clients.
Yeah, yeah.
And on one hand, I don't really mind. I enjoy spending time with them. I'm capable of setting that hard stop when I really need to, because I have something coming up after. And it's ultimately not respecting my time and the rate and my hourly rate.
Yeah, yeah.
So today I added in an opening ceremony and a closing ceremony, and I just set a timer for 30 minutes until the end.
Yeah, yeah.
And oh my gosh, it worked so well, and I felt so much less drained. And I was like, yeah, like, okay, Rose, good job.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like those containers are both good for the recipient and for the practitioner. You know, there was a lot of times in the early stages of doing work that I didn't have like that type of structure. And yeah, I found myself just feeling really drained at the end of the day. Not drained in a way of like, as a manifesting generator, there is a sense of desire of like using my energy to a certain point by the end of the day, right? So that I am actually rest and not be restless, right? But that's a different type of energy that I'm like drained, meaning I haven't had the opportunity to really put my integrated genius to practice and my gifts. So the containers, I've noticed, or at least that structure of the session, the flow, meaning the time and the beginning and the middle and the end, like there's some sort of structure or flow with that. I've noticed then I can do 2 or 3 sessions very easily a day, and I feel amazing afterwards. The client feels amazing afterwards. And the feminine energy, which just wants to, you know, nourish and flow with it and bring in that healing, gets to still show up. But there's something about creating that masculine structure and container that I feel that part of me has more availability and opportunity to feel nourished, right? To feel safe and to really expand and then also be valued. You know, because then I'm not stressing about the time. They're not stressing about the time. I'm not, you know, stressing about, wait, did I fit everything that I want to? Oh, I wanted to address this point and I didn't. And then maybe that they are not feeling like, oh, what am I going to expect? What is going to happen in this session? What am I going to get out of this session? You know, so I feel like there's a lot of like unknowns that can be really held really beautifully when we have some sort of structure and container. You know,
yeah, it's so good. For the listeners, welcome back to the Naturally Rosy podcast. I am so turned on sitting here with my guest. We didn't talk about an introduction, which is maybe a lapse on my part, or maybe a gift.
Let's lean into it.
Yeah, let's lean into it. Would you like me to introduce you, or would you like to introduce yourself?
Ooh, can I have a little bit of both?
Please. Yeah.
I'm getting... why don't you start by introducing how you know me? And then I will gladly pick up and then speak more to like the other parts of like who I am and stuff. How about something like that?
Would you like me to say your name?
Oh, yeah. I guess it's important to know.
It feels like a big deal. maybe.
Well, I figured if you were going to if you're going to start by knowing how you know me, that you would say my name at that point.
Well, I felt like maybe I'll just leave the listeners in the mystery.
In the mystery of like, I met this person.
Yes. Yeah, it's been almost exactly 13 months.
Mm-hmm.
Just over a year. Oh, chapstick. my body is saying it's dehydrated.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating how, well, at least for me, I feel so much more dehydrated in the winter than I do in the summer. Mm-hmm. So much more.
Mm-hmm. Even in Missouri, where it sometimes feels that the humidity is never ending until that cold, dry wind smacks you in the face.
Yep.
I was down when we were down in Austin this past weekend, and it wasn't warm there like I was hoping it would be. It was rainy and cloudy, not all, but most of the time. And I actually found myself wanting for winter.
Oh.
And maybe it was that I was in the intensity of PMSing the whole time we were there. I started my period on the way back, started bleeding. And I found myself down there like, it's not supposed to feel like that. Like this, it's supposed to be cold right now. I want my seasons. Which is very different from the person who moved from Texas at 13 to Missouri and was like, ugh.
I don't want this one.
Cold! Right.
This is now my 7th cold winter. So being like originally from San Diego where there is no winter, like I'm going home to visit home next Wednesday, and the day that I land it's 70 degrees.
Oh, yes.
I woke up this morning and it was 20. But it has been true. It has gotten easier. It really has. And my body has really acclimated so much. Sometimes to the point where I forget how cold it really is outside, and I just go in a hoodie and I should be wearing 5 layers.
Right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It's really cold outside.
It's just so exciting. I feel so excited. I met Ksandra just over a year ago, 13 months ago, at a meeting with her and Cara Lily, who I will ask for consent from before publishing this. At a house meeting to drop in and feel into if I was a good fit to move into the house that Cara Lily manages and that you had already moved into. Just
like before. A month, like a few weeks before. But I had known her already for over a year and a half.
And my housing situation was changing. I was looking for a new place. I was introduced to Cara Lily through one of our mutual friends, and she's like, so I want to have this like meeting with Ksandra to make sure we're all a yes. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like, this just became way more formal than any roommate situation I've ever experienced. And I felt a little nervous for that meeting, and it was like very appropriately edgy for me. And I remember I felt so struck by how vulnerable we all were at that first meeting. So that's how we met. Lived together for about 6 months. and, or just over, 7 months. And yeah, 7 months, and I moved out at the end of June into the space we're sitting in now. Yeah, and yeah.
Now, should we tell the listener what your favorite thing about me is?
Oh my gosh. Now I'm on the spot. Okay. It is that you are so stable in yourself. And particular, like I relish a woman who is strong in her masculine energy. That is very comforting to me. Like, especially a woman who's very strong in her masculine and her feminine energy.
Yeah.
That breeds a lot of trust in me. That's an experience like I have personally.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's not my experience with most women I've met in my past.
Yeah.
And yeah, it took me some time to realize that about you, and to learn to not make it personal. And now I'm just like, and same with Cara Lily, like the level to which I can just to where I feel so free to be myself, because I feel so much non-judgment and non-personalization from both of you, because you are so stable in yourself.
Yeah.
Life-changing. Life-changing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for seeing me in that. It's the balance of finding my connection to the embodied feminine has only really been really strong the last 4 years. And when I moved to St. Louis and meeting Cara Lily, and one of the main reasons I wanted to move into the community home was to be able to further embody that part, because for a very long time my masculine side had been what was predominant. And even though I did have really good life experiences, and even the challenging experiences were amazing, I actually struggled a lot to what I perceived at the time is to find community and belong. But now that I look back at that, really what was missing is that I wasn't connected to another half of myself. So I didn't even have a sense of feeling of belonging within me, like a knowing of fully of like who I am. And so if I don't know fully who I am, then how can I relate to others and have a sense of belonging? Because I didn't even have that connection within me. And all of that, I mean, the journey of that really started about 15 years ago when I had what I call my third eye popping open, like awakening. It totally happened by surprise. It did not, never expected. Like, I was 28 years old and had never even heard of the word meditation, let alone like energy healing or none of that, right? And a sequence of events and a health issue that doctors couldn't figure out put me in front of a woman who did acupuncture on me, which was the first time I had ever heard of that. Didn't really like it. And she goes, well, I think that I have this other thing that I do that is called meditation. And I'm like, what is that? She goes, well, come in and, you'll sit down and I guide you through it. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but there was something in me that said, go do that, right? So I go in there, I sit down, and she goes, okay, I studied this modality called theta healing, and you're just going to sit there, and you're going to close your eyes, and I'm going to do a little guided visual, and you just visualize the words as I guide you. And I was like, okay, I can do this. So I closed my eyes. We're in, I'm being told 3 minutes in. We were 3 minutes in. My eyes are closed. I literally feel a pop, and what I later learned was the third eye, and I was in the space of the etherical nothingness where nothing and everything exists. And I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, and she's like, okay, where are you? And I said, I don't know, but I have a sense that I'm going to remember.
Mm.
And in that moment, after that, like as the days and the years went on, everything just started to open and download and come in. And so at first it was meant to be just a personal journey. You know, I had some relationship stuff that I really wanted to heal and change with my parents. I had come out of another relationship and it just hadn't worked out. It was the first time in my young adult life where I had gone to college and gotten the job and had the apartment and did all the things that were, you know, told to do. And then over a course of a weekend, it all fell apart. Ooh. You know, it was what I call my first Phoenix evolution happened. And so I was like, okay, something's going on in life right now that it needs a shift. And so and then the health issue. And so this third eye thing open, you know, I had this third eye awakening. And then I started doing more sessions, and then I hear you're meant to do this, and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. And they're like, no, you're meant to do this for others. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. I don't know about that, you guys. Like, you know. And they're like, no, yeah, you're meant to do this. And so a year after that, I got my training in theta healing. I was certified as a practitioner and an instructor. But from that, really, in the last, you know, over 15 years now, it's evolved into where I have landed now is where I call myself a shamanic tantrika and medicine woman, right? And my biggest thing that I love to do for individuals is hold ceremony sessions and containers where they go on a journey of remembrance, you know, and a deep cultivation of a relationship with themselves. And I think that what that allows is it allows an opportunity to not only learn who we authentically are, but also have the willingness and the courage and the ability to show up that way in our lives, right? So we really are thriving in our authenticity. And so in those spaces, I just use different tools of like shamanism and tantra and plant medicine, and I help weave all that together for an individual. So they're cultivating their own medicine wheel. So they're going in their own journey of remembrance, and I'm just kind of adding little supplemental things here and there for that journey. So yeah, it started totally personal, you know, didn't even know what was going on, to like, hey, this is what you're going to do with your life. And here we are now.
I feel that's the journey for everyone that comes into serving as a facilitator from an authentic place. There's such a direct contrast between that and people who study doctoring, study counseling intellectually and don't have that personal experience. Yeah.
And there are individuals who go down that path, right? Who have had something happen in their lives that it inspires them to go and learn that, and to like study that. And I think there is a part of that they're learning for themselves, right? They're going through something, and so that course of action allows them to gain some information. But yes, I mean, even
my experience.
But even on the holistic practitioner side, there are individuals who the same thing. They go through the motion of learning a modality or learning an instrument and learning how to space hold, but without that personal experience, without that personal intuitive impulse, that unique gift that we get to weave into the offering, whether it is more therapeutic in nature or more holistic in nature, without that piece, I feel like there's something that doesn't get to be experienced by both the practitioner and the individual, you know, in that space.
Yeah, I feel I want to try to conceptualize that, and what I'm visualizing is an individual that's been through that personal journey, really of death, like of a deep death. They've, in order to get to the point where they can facilitate, at all, and certainly to facilitate with positive results, they have to have found their way out of their cave.
Yeah.
Which often starts very blindly.
Yep.
And requires cultivating a sense of inner knowing, listening to that sense, and acting on that sense, often despite messaging from the external world to not do that.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to hold space for and support and encourage another person to go on that same journey.
Correct.
And walk blindly through turning on bits of light within themselves and finding their way out of their own cave.
Correct. Yeah.
If one has not done that themselves, because it's so I don't love this term, but counterintuitive or counter-intellectual. It's so counter how we might think it would be prior to going through it.
Yeah. One of my mentors, there was someone in one of the trainings who was like really concerned about their ability. She's like, what if we get clients that we can't help, or we can't quote unquote handle, or anything like that. And well, there's a couple of thoughts that come in from that. The first thought, though, is that one of her simple responses is, you only need to be one step ahead, right? And there's like, and not in the sense, and from a very authentic space, right? Like, I don't feel that I need to have all of my life completely figured out and perfect, and that makes me a good facilitator. I think, if anything, the fact that I am very messy still in a lot of areas, and there's some areas in my life where I struggle more than others, makes me even more of an authentic and effective space holder. But yeah, to what you're saying is like, within a life experience, there are all these like death and rebirth cycles. Like there's like these little baby ones, and there's the big ones, right? And so I do believe that I wouldn't feel confident holding space for another person that's going through something that I haven't even gone through in some form myself. And maybe even if I haven't gotten all the way out of it, that I have within that space had some sort of evolution or aha moment, right? Kind of a small breakthrough. Maybe it wasn't like the solution. Maybe we haven't completed the whole thing. But if I haven't been able to walk through some of that, I think that it makes it just a little bit more challenging, right? And then she was also saying, like, only those who you are ready to help will come to you anyways. But this also brings up something which was really interesting. I was also talking to a friend one time, and they were really struggling with the idea of, like, this piece that you're talking to. They're like, how can I'm being called to hold space for some, for people in this area, but I haven't even figured it out myself. And I was like, well, what if you're just meant to be that person? So the image that I got was like of Moses, right? So Moses would get messages from God, and it would be, I'm going to overly simplify this, okay? So meaning no insult to anything, but I'm going to overly simplify this example.
We mean no offense.
No offense here, okay? I'm sorry if I get any of the things wrong, but I'm going to oversimplify this. But basically,
I feel Moses feels really good about
okay,
this.
good. I like it. So basically, we had a man who was receiving divine guidance to take a journey in life. And he was also guided to lead others on that same journey. But it was a journey he hadn't taken himself. Right? He hadn't gone across the desert and been, hey, you guys, so I went across the desert, or he didn't even go ahead a week and be like, hey, I found the path for the next week. All he received was the next day, right? The next message, the next step. And so I felt like he was very authentic in showing up of like, hey, I am receiving this divine guidance to go on this journey. This is where I am, and this is where I'm heading. and I'm willing to hold space for others as we move through that. And so I think that even in that space, I feel as long as we're very honest to ourselves of like where we are in our journey, that we will be shown how we are meant to hold space with others and walk in journeys with others, whether we're walking the path together, like next to each other, or there's a little bit of a trailblazer, right? Where I've kind of gone through a couple of death, rebirth cycles in that subject. And now I'm being guided to like bring that to other people as well, so.
I am asking for this, for what you're speaking to. It's very relevant for me right now. I particularly what your teacher said about we will not have those come to us who are not
that we are not meant to,
that we're not meant to, or able to support, to guide, and I love that can look a lot of different ways. Like I have many individuals reach out interested in coaching that I don't end up working with for a variety of reasons. And my desire, my intention is that anyone who reaches out genuinely receives something from me in our connection, in how I respond. Whether that's ultimately that we start working together, whether that's me giving them a referral for someone who would be a better fit for them, whether that's a book I recommend, a song, a smiley face emoji that adds some brightness to their day, whatever that is.
Yeah. And I mean, who's to say that interaction wasn't enough for you to be a space holder or a channel for them? I think that a lot of times, just kind of like in relationships, and I don't mean just romantic, I mean like friendships and acquaintanceships and stuff like that. Like I remember hearing like, I wish I could remember the whole phrase right now, but I'm going to butcher this, but it's a really beautiful phrase. Like some people are here for like the day,
a reason,
a
season,
and
or a lifetime.
Yeah. And I think that that's the same thing when it comes to someone crossing our path, right? Because like you, I've had a few people sometimes reach out to me and I'm like, I know that I'm not a good fit for them, right? And yet there is something in the interaction that we have, whether it's a 5-minute interaction or ends up being an hour consult call, and then we still decide, or I've even had it where I've started something with a person, a container, and then it just doesn't feel that moving forward is in alignment. But yet there is an energy exchange. There was something there that was exchanged. There's an experience that was had that can bring, if we're both open to it, can bring both insight or a gift or an understanding or clarity or an answer, for both of us involved. You know?
I love that. I feel like the gift of being a facilitator who is authentic, genuine, and especially vulnerable, recognizing that I am, you are, other people, etc., are human beings. We have our messes, and it's actually not serving me or my clients or the people listening to this podcast or the people who read my Substack, whoever is on the other end of the services I provide. It's actually not serving them or me for me to hide and pretend that I'm not a messy human being that like doesn't know everything, right? And what I have found in my experiences with leaders is that their vulnerability cultivates more respect and trust in me compared to individuals that I wouldn't consider leaders at the point that I realize, oh, you have a front up. You are refraining from sharing your heart, your genuine self with those who you are offering to lead. That as soon as I realize that about a person, it's such a turnoff for me. It's such a turnoff. I learn so much from people's vulnerability. And likewise, I give the people who I serve the opportunity to learn from my vulnerability for a variety of reasons, including that I have no desire to be pedestaled.
Right. I don't want that responsibility.
No, you're not. Please,
that
no.
That is a big responsibility that I do not want.
Not at all.
It doesn't allow me to make mistakes.
Right. Yeah, I love like laughing and telling my clients, like, I don't want to be responsible for you. Like, I'm not going to. And likewise, and something that really I run into more often is helping my clients unwind patterns that tell them that they need to be responsible for me. And I love taking that weight back from them. And sometimes all that takes is a little bit of conversation, and sometimes that's a multiple session, them learning somatically, like really like, oh, this woman can be responsible for herself. She's honest with me. She's responsible for her feelings. She's genuine in saying what she is okay with and what she's not okay with. And that's such a huge, I mean, it's that's a cripplingly heavy weight to carry around. Like the responsibility for other people. With like the exception of a child, and still, and I've never had a child, and I imagine, like, even in the most ideal, blissful way, that's still an extra weight to manage.
With the hope that you're also instructing them and guiding them to find independence.
Yes, to inspire them to to that level of all the good things.
Every time I have a new client come in, when I first was doing more of like what I call like my intense dive, like intense, like containers, a client once asked me, well, can you like explain like what role you play? And I was like, ooh, this is a good question. And every time I close my eyes and I connect with my higher self, I get images, right? And so then the images get translated into words. And all I could see was a construction site with one of those fences, the temporary fences around. And I'm like, this is not a very spiritual image. I was like, what are you guys trying to show me? And I was like, okay, well, what's next? What else do I say? And this is the time where I was, my guides and my higher self will only give me one image at a time. And until I start describing the image, I don't get the next image, right? So that way I'm like, I'm out of my own interpretation. I'm just like literally like real time channeling. And so I was like, okay, it's going to be interesting. I'm like, okay, well, kind of like at a construction site for a building, that temporary fence that you put around the construction site. And my client's just sitting there kind of nodding their heads really quiet. I'm inside as my human self going like, oh my God, this is going to go so bad. I don't know what's about to happen. I was like, okay, well, imagine that my first role is as that fence. So I come in and I kind of help create and put up this temporary fencing of like, this is the container, this is the bubble, this is the sacred space in which we're now going to address the renovation of your home, of your building, which is the internal psyche, right? And I was like, and all of a sudden, then I got the image of the building imploding or half the wall being taken down, or the like all the way down to the foundation. And I was like, and then the journey is going to the spectrum is going to be anywhere from a complete paradigm shift where the entire building might need to come down, or a big renovation or a little renovation. And so then as we're going through the container, my role evolves into temporary scaffolding. Right? And so then I got those images of like my role is then to be a temporary scaffolding where I'm holding the structure of what I've already experienced myself, right? Tools that I have learned. But I'm not overly imposing or becoming something permanent. There's still space for them to, structure things or bring new things in. It's just kind of enough of a scaffold, enough of a support, I should say, to help them figure out the floor plan and the color and all that stuff, right? And then so when the building is done, I'm removed. The scaffolding goes away, the fence comes down, and I leave. No permanent in the sense of like, I'm not leaving me behind, right? Like I'm not weaved in and embedded into someone, but obviously I have contributed to someone's experience,
Oh, that's so good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I will probably use that at some point. That's so good.
Yeah.
I want to circle back to what came to me when we were talking about Moses. And this is echoing something in a book I'm listening to. That the first thing that Moses had to have and what really set him apart was his faith.
Yeah.
That faith moves mountains. It has to be the first step.
Yeah.
Even if, and often it can be subconscious.
Yeah.
It can be, it can be showing up in a place that ends up giving us support, even if it's on a day where we feel like our world is tumbling down. And we happen to go to this place and we happen to receive some guidance, and there was something in the subconscious, in the spirit, in the mystery there that's still hung on, that still felt magnetized to where it would bear fruit.
Yeah. And I think with that, as you're talking, when you're speaking about that, what then comes in is the importance of the internal dialogue that we have then, right? Because when we do come up against those moments, right? I mean, I even experienced this myself, and I'm going through something right now that it's a resurfacing of something, that I had buried when I was like 7 years old emotionally. And right now, in real time, I'm feeling the fullness of what my 7-year-old version felt, right? And so it's super tender. And when it hits me that intensely, right? When we uncover such a deep wound, it's almost like everything that I've learned so far and everything that I have healed for this moment in time, it goes like out the window.
Yes.
Right? It just like, it almost, I go back into this infancy mindset of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can handle this. Right? And so within that, what you're speaking to is the faith, right? That starts to come, there's an essence of that comes in. And then the internal dialogue of like, I do know what to do. I have overcome things. Right? I have been here to some extent before. I've been worse before. And in all of that, I am still here. I am still breathing, right? I am still present. And I do have the ability to hold this and move through this and continue following that intuitive guidance, right? Or the divine messages as he received to keep taking the next step and the next step. And so, yeah, I feel that with that, like the faith comes in, and then I think what it's like the image I'm getting is like a little ember. So like the faith is the ember, and then the words, that internal dialogue, is what feeds that ember and creates a bigger fire, which feeds a bigger momentum and an ability to alchemize something in our lives, right? And then that's the image that I'm being shown right now.
Yeah, so good, so good. I am mindful of logistical things.
Yes, please.
And so the container for this podcast is that the first part of our conversation will go out as well. It'll be episode 14.
Okay.
And then the second half of the recording will be episode 15.
Great.
The invitation is for us both to drop in deeper during the second half.
Okay, perfect.
And during this first half especially, so this first half is the portion that will be public, free, available to whoever wants to listen to it. And I want the people to hear we don't have time for your whole story, and the highlights, some pivotal moments, offering some hope, some surprise, some faith. I feel so many people are on this cusp of their greatness.
Yeah.
And hearing, like we talked about, hearing stories from others as to how close that can be when if we just reach out, can make all the difference. It can inspire that action to put another foot forward, to make that phone call, to send that text, whatever it is that has been floating around, orbiting us, that we've been, stop. What does that even mean? Yeah. And that if we just did the thing, it would change our lives. Yeah. So that.
You want me to speak to that? Got him. What comes in first is, I think that what is needed is an understanding that there's going to be a mixture of messages and life experiences that we might view as little and big, and all the spectrum in between. Right? So I know that I mentioned right before I turned 28, I had my third eye popped, awakening.
And that is a play on cherry popping. Jokes are always better when Rosie explains them.
It's the spiritual one. It's the spiritual cherry.
Yes.
And I tell that story, and every time after I tell that story, my higher self goes, "Sweetie, it started before then." And then they remind me of two other things. One, which was a big thing, which was like a near-death experience that I keep forgetting that I went through. And another is the most day-to-day, thing that could have happened, could happen to anybody. But because I listened to that impulse to pause and to do the thing, right? It literally led to one of the biggest changes in my life. So I want to speak to that one first. So the near-death experience happened, and that was probably a year before this little thing happened. That literally was the pivot, right? So a whole bunch of life changes happened. I found myself back living at my mom's house for the first time in my mid-20s. And at the time, I was really struggling with being back at home. I had moved out when I was 18 and had really gone through, started young adult life and, things like that. And when I came back, it was like I was seeing how much my relationship with my parents was not where I wanted it to be. right? And kind of like this feeling of like, I think it could be different, but I don't know how it could be different. And I don't even know like where to start, right? There was kind of just like this antsiness of like, something just doesn't feel right here, right? And again, remember, I didn't even know the word meditation or anything of that yet, right? I had no conscious awareness of any of that. And so my mom's like, hey, I have a box of books in the garage. Can you go drop them off at the library? They're willing to accept it as a donation. And I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. So I grabbed the box and I put the box in the car, and a book fell out and it fell on the floor. And I picked up the book, and I was kind of annoyed at the book, and I like threw the book into the trunk with the rest of the box, right? And then I dropped off the books at the library, and I took out the box, didn't realize that book was still in there. And I'm driving for about a few days, and every time I pushed my brakes, the book would slide in the trunk. Because I didn't have anything else in the trunk, right? So every time I would brake, I would hear this dunk, dunk. And I was like, what is that? And even though I knew what it was, for 3 days, I still allowed myself to be annoyed by the book in the trunk, right? Like, just so annoyed. And finally, on the 4th day, I stop at a stoplight, chunk, I hear the thing, and I'm like, you know what? That's it. And I literally put my car in park and get up, go into the trunk, grab the book, and get into the front seat. And I'm also annoyed at it. And then I look down, and the book said, How to Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Oh my God. Yes.
And I was like, I knew that my mom was only readers. She loved like romance novels, Daniel Steele and all of that. She was very into that. So I was shocked that my mother had bought and read a book like that. I was like, well, this is interesting. And it kind of started to give me a little bit of insight to my mom and maybe perceiving her in a different way, right? And second of all, I was like, wait, there's a book out there that tells you how to heal your life? Like, I want to read this. And so I sat down on a hammock, and I think I devoured the book in a day. But she has like activities in there. So I went back and every day I would do one of the activities. And so it was just that simple thing of like the book, it's like the synchronicity, right? Of that. Hey, can you go drop off the books? Pick up the box of the books out of all the books. That's the one that, falls on the ground. And I pick it up, throw it in the trunk, right? And so I think that sometimes when we're desiring such a change in our lives, which I was at that age, and I didn't even know what I wanted different. Like, I didn't even know what I wanted different. I just knew that the way that I was interacting with my parents and the way that I was experiencing life, like something just felt off. And I couldn't even put to words, like, what was the thing that was off, let alone what is the solution, to the thing, right? And so I think that sometimes when we want these big changes and we don't have a vocabulary for it, we can really quickly convince ourselves that it's too big of a task, right? Or it's too overwhelming, or that we have to learn something grand or experience this grand thing in order for us to start the journey or for there to be a significant difference. But that one book, right, that one little experience and listening to like, hey, what is this book? Like looking at it, and I could have read it and I could have been like, ugh, whatever. But it was in that moment, like that was a pivotal moment when I looked at the title of the book, and I was like, there was a part of me that just wanted to throw the book out, right? I was already so annoyed, right? But it wasn't at the book. It was just at my life. Like, just things were not the way, like, life wasn't where it was supposed to be when I was 25 years old, according to what everyone had said, right? And so it was that pivotal moment where I was like, you know what? I'm going to be curious, and I'm going to be open in this moment to why is this book in my hands? Like, why am I in this moment being given this opportunity? And so I think it really starts with knowing that they're going to be little moments, and then they're going to be big moments.
Yeah.
I've had two what I call phoenix evolutions happen in my life, where my entire life, every area of my life within a span of 6 months crumbles to the ground, and everything that I've identified with is completely gone. So I've had those monumental and even of near-death experience, to there's a book in my hands right now, right? Or I'm checking out at a grocery store, and there's like this impulse to look at the cashier in the eye, right, and smile or say like, "How are you doing?" And then that exchange that happens in that moment can say something. I can say something to them, or they can say something to me. So I think it's really about like, can we slow down enough to just pay attention to even the little things? And can we just, with curiosity, be like, I wonder why I'm in this position? Even the challenging ones. I wonder why I'm in this position. You know, and what does this experience, what does this book, what does this human being in front of me, what is the gift that wants to come to me, so I can make those small, medium, and then large steps in my life to being able to like actually thrive in the life that I want, you know. So yeah, that was the story that was
yeah, so good. And to put that in a context for those who may not receive something that is very, if that experience that Ksandra is talking about is very abstract to you, I'll just plant the seed that what she's describing is very much a skill, is very much a strength or something, a muscle that, just like going to the gym and running or doing curls, bicep curls, it is a skill. It is a muscle, an emotional, mental, spiritual muscle that can be, we can learn to tune into, we can learn to exercise, and we can strengthen. And over time, and then there's an exponential growth there that occurs. And exactly what you said, it requires a slowing down, a tuning into the self, a learning to listen to the body, to the emotions, to the higher self, and even to the mind in a new way that is open, that is detached. I'm using that word loosely. Learning to sit in that observer seat of our experience, and not be so fast, not be so clingy, not be so attached to a particular outcome
or reactive.
Yes. Victor, I'm wanting to say Schrodinger, and then I'm like, no, that's the cat guy. Schonberg, pretty famous personal development quote. This guy Victor,
Vinny.
Vinny.
What does Vinny have to say about the subject?
Well, Vinny said, but in the space between stimulus and response is choice.
Yes. And that's what I was speaking to. Like, up until that book was in my hands, right? I was very reactive. I was reactive to, my mom had asked me to take the books to the library. Why am I being reactive? But I was, I was reactive to the book had fallen on the ground. I annoyingly threw it into the trunk. I was reactive and annoyed that the book was moving in the trunk, right? And I was even reactive when I got the book and I went to go sit down in my car. And when I looked at the title, I could have continued to be reactive or dismissive, I think is another word that's coming in. But in that moment, I made a choice. There was like, I could sense, even though that muscle was very, very, very little and very, very weak, in that moment, there was a twinge in that muscle that was saying, hey, take a breath. Just take a breath right now. And can you have a willingness to just be curious and respond in a different way? And so it was the choice in that moment, And in that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm going to read this book. Why not? And then there goes the rest. Yeah, it's a great quote. Good job, Benny.
Yes. Yeah, I may be totally off. And if I'm remembering correctly, he served time in one of the concentration camps during World War II and has a really famous book that I'll attempt to find quickly.
Isn't it beautiful and fascinating how technology works these days?
Right.
I remember rushing from school from high school after school because I needed to get home and get on the computer with the internet dial up to get my homework done. But if my brothers got there before me, they would get on the phone or on the dial up to play their games. So it was dial up, and only one person could be on one computer, and it would take minutes to be able to like log on and get the server going.
Okay, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Okay.
Yeah, from 1946.
Wow. Yeah.
Would you like to share your near-death experience?
Yes, I can definitely share that. I didn't even know that it was considered a near-death experience because in my mind, some people, when they describe it, they talk about actually crossing over and then coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So mine
when they describe a general near-death experience.
Correct. Yeah. And so for a long time, I didn't know that this is what it was. But a few years later, after it happened, I actually was told that it was. And I was like, oh, okay. So at the time, I was living in San Diego and I was driving up to LA because I had a boyfriend in LA. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but on your drive from San Diego to LA, there is this point where there's like a 5-lane highway. And then I don't know now how it is, but that eventually came down to 2-lane highway. And at one point, they were trying to expand it into a 3-lane, right? So I had gotten to the point of the highway where the 5 lanes had now condensed down into 2 lanes. And there wasn't a lot of traffic. Like, we were all just going, in that point of California, like 90 is like normal.
Damn.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yes.
And I was going that. I now drive like a grandmother, so it's all good now. But I was going at least 90.
That sounds fun.
Right? That's so much fun. But like you can't go any less because everyone else is going 90.
Sure.
You know, it's really actually dangerous not to go at the speed in which most traffic is. So we're all cruising along. Everything is fine. There's like I am driving at the right speed in between me and the car in front of me, right? And in this driving school, I remember, I think they pass a landmark and then you count up to 4,000. And if you cross it, then that's enough time between you and the car. Anyways, that's a whole side thing.
Are you also teaching driver's ed?
Maybe that's what I should teach. I'm not sure. I am going back into the teaching industry, which is a whole other thing. But so anyways, this guy, I guess, did not like that I was going 90. I guess he wanted me to go 100. So he comes up again, like next to me, and he's like, I could just feel like this energy of intensity. And there's plenty of room for him to come into my lane from the car in front of me, but he decides to cut me off. He decides to come in like super close to my front bumper, right? And so, but because he's going faster than me, I don't have to like brake too much, right? I just kind of was jarred by that. Well, then a few seconds later, I guess the car in front of him had to stop. And so now all of a sudden I'm seeing red lights all across I think it was 3 lanes by now. Every car is now stopping. And I'm going 90. And I'm very close now. I'm no longer at a safe distance. And now what I'm about to describe to me happened in a matter of minutes. In real time, it was milliseconds, right? So all of a sudden, I feel myself go out of my body, which I later found out I went into the gamma brain, into the gamma state of the mind. And it was like I was overseeing the whole incident and everything slowed down. And in that slowing down, I was shown 3 possible outcomes.
Wow.
Outcome number 1 was that I would slam on my brake, hit the car in front of me. I would die instantaneously. The guy in front of me would also have internal injuries, and like 6 other people would get injured. And I was like, okay. Then to the left of me, there was like these temporary cement blocks because of the construction. I was told that if I turned to...
It's like the Ksandra of the past.
Yes. And so like next to me was like these temporary cinder blocks, and I was shown, and then it was like where they worked, and then the other side of the highway. So there was like an empty spot right there, right?
Okay.
So I showed that if I turned to the left, I would hit the cement, and that the force that I would hit it, my car would flip over the cement things, landing me in the construction area, but there was no one working that day, and that I would die. I was like, okay. And then if I veered to the right, I would potentially hit some of the cars next to me. There would be some injuries, no deaths there, but I also would die. And I was like, okay, so in any of these scenarios, I'm going to die. And I'll tell you, there was this sense of peace that came over me. I really wasn't afraid of death. I was surprised at how calm I was. And I was like, well, I surrender to the knowing that I'm about to die, and I cannot in good consciousness injure or kill anybody else. So I'm going to turn my wheel to the left. Okay. So I turned my wheel to the left, and I felt that I was letting go. Right. So I guess that's when someone said, hey, that's actually a near death experience. You actually let go. But I don't remember too much seeing the white light, or maybe I wasn't in there very quickly, because the next thing I know, I'm on the other side of the highway, facing still the right direction, about 2 inches away from the wall of where like the emergency lane is, right? And I remember
on the right
on the right side. So I was in the fast lane.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's like I closed my eyes and released, and then I opened my eyes, and I'm on the right side now of the highway, facing the right direction, a couple inches from the wall that was on that side of the highway. And as I opened my eyes and looked up, the school bus of children drove by, and the look of horror on their face made me realize, oh my God, what did they just see? And I looked around, and there was like no accident, no nothing. And then I remember like asking myself, like, what just happened? And then I wasn't getting an answer. Again, I wasn't connected. I just wasn't getting an answer. But as I looked up, I saw that right in front of me was an exit from the highway, and there was a gas station right there. And I was like, okay, my car is still running. So I just drove off. I was already in the exit, kind of near the exit lane. I drove off. I came into the parking lot. By then, now my body was shaking, right? Yeah. And I turned off the car, and I just started sobbing. I just started crying and crying and crying because I was grateful that I wasn't dead, even though I was okay with that. I was very grateful for that. I was really confused of like, what just happened, and what does this mean? Like, why am I here? Like, it started to bring all these questions that a 25-year-old, and I'm not saying any 25, but like myself at 25, and I think most people that young ask like those very deep introspective questions of like, wait a second, like, what is my life, and what am I supposed to do here? Like, there was just this moment of like, oh my God, I think I'm being like pulled a little bit out of like the matrix, and I don't know what's going on here, And it wasn't until years later that I found out that it was a near-death experience. The memory came back of what had happened. So basically, I turned left, and I then eventually remembered that a spirit guy said, it's not your time, not yet. And so my car started turning circles, but not like tumbling, but just turning circles into
like
the
donuts.
Like donuts. Yes, like donuts. And the timing of it was perfect because the traffic had cleared enough for me to do that. And what happened was what somewhat happened was an element of a walk-in, right? And so a walk-in is when someone's current soul fragment just releases connection to life for a variety of reasons. I'm also oversimplifying this, okay? But the person's current soul fragment or soul completely has felt that it has come to a completion of its reincarnation. However, the life of that physical body and the mission of the physical body is not done yet. So another soul fragment or another soul comes in
I've heard of
to
this.
continue the life cycle of that being.
What did you call that?
A walk-in.
A walk-in.
A walk-in. And so what I had was a soul fragment walk-in experience, right? Which then brings in a new consciousness, new ability to see the world. You know, it brings in, and so it was this very interesting thing. And then the year later is when I got to the book. But yeah, it's just, I think it's one of those things. It's like questioning life. I think sometimes we get scared of like questioning things because I feel like sometimes it may come across as like we're not grateful, right? Or we're not satisfied. Or what if there's no answer? You know, so I think that there can be a scariness to, and it's not even questioning. I think it's more contemplating, right? I think that that's another tool and muscle that also is really important to work on when wanting to make changes in our lives, whether they're little and big.
How does that look?
So like
practically.
So for me in that moment, up into that moment, all I did was I think just complain about things. You know, I think I was just at that time just complaining about things. And also just going with the motions of what I thought young adults are supposed to do. So it was like, I think that like those two things were present, maybe some other things, but those are the two that are coming. And so for me, when that accident happened and I started to ask, wait, what just happened? I think it was the first time ever in my life that I questioned, like my reality, right? And not from a place of like complaining and not from a place of like people pleasing or trying to be the good girl or to be the, you know, the good student, but just from a place of like this, that's interesting. I wonder what, like, it's almost like the sense of like, what potentially exists bigger outside of my current understanding and perception of this situation, right? So for contemplation, I forget the guy who does the gene keys.
Rupert? Somebody? K?
I can't remember now. I know there's a lot of people that do gene keys, but this particular...
Oh, you're not talking about the guy that, like, wrote the book. You're talking about...
He has, like, a... He teaches about the gene keys, and I think he did write some books on it, but from my understanding...
Richard Rudd?
That's him.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Richard.
He has a really good, beautiful explanation of contemplation. But really what it is when we sit and asking a question that opens us to receive something outside of our current scope of understanding. But we don't sit in it with like trying to analyze it and like break down and like, you know, like it's like this energetic and mental opening that happens to allow life to reflect back to us through experiences and interactions, the insight to those questions. And in doing that, it's like this organic pull of our evolution as an individual, our maturity, our expansion, the ability to expand, which is different than meditating or analyzing or problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just a different muscle that we use both mentally and emotionally and energetically, but yeah, he has a really beautiful, deeper understanding. But when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a really, I think, a beautiful muscle and tool to have when we're trying to embody and understand something that is beyond our current scope of understanding, or even accessibility, right, to the book or the person or the podcast. There's something about that can also bring in the answers.
Yeah. I want to speak to that and to say, well, so reflecting on my own experience, it took years of intentional practice and a lot of experiences that were totally unintentional consciously before I got to the point that I could ask a question and just let it be there without trying to figure it out. I, like you, grew up with a very strong masculine energy and while I don't, okay, not digressing on that path, coming back to what I'm saying.
It's so easy.
It's so easy. It's so fucking easy. And something that really fed, really nourished, really benefited me in learning to to ask a question and then let it be there and not figuring it out. And I didn't realize this as I was starting to do it, but over time I saw, doing that other thing helped me with this thing. Has been and this is my recommendation for anyone who has a very active mind, and the idea of like asking a question without trying to figure it out feels very foreign. Is instead of looking at it like a question that there is that a question that you want an answer to, just consider that the question is a phrase that you're wanting to plant in your subconscious mind through autosuggestion. Just meaning that autosuggestion, meaning it's so like positive affirmations are an example of autosuggestion. Just the process of exposing oneself to words, to an idea, to an image, to a feeling so frequently that it implants in the subconscious. So, question off the top of my head, who am I? Asking that question without the intention of even receiving an answer at all. Simply by asking it, writing it on a note and putting it on the mirror, maybe placing it some other places around the house, creating the habit of asking that question when waking up and before going to bed, and pretty soon the question will just be playing on autopilot in the mind. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And there's some practice there too of continuing to not hold on to it, to not try to figure it out. And what happens over time then is that that question will be answered organically. That we get to learn, there's actually not a figuring out that I need to do beyond just the fun creativity of what do I want.
And what's really cool about that, so that in of itself can be life changing. And then The other like journey that it allows for is in the idea in the conceptual like contemplating of like who am I. You could also add a journey like the sub journey of being the witness of what things come up for you and asking a question with the intention of no response, right? Because it's like it's going to exercise other little muscles. It's going to potentially could exercise the muscle of being comfortable with the unknown, right? It can exercise the muscle of not needing to have control of always immediate
instant gratification.
Thank you. That's the word. Yeah, it helps to release a tight grip around that. So in that in and of itself, like you said, the journey of that will bring that. But what's other really cool is like there's all these other little journeys that can happen, and all these other little muscles that get to be put to play, and where we can just be the witness and we can actually learn who we are in this moment in time of how we are responding or reacting to asking a big question and then letting it go. And then it opens up avenues to be able to do things like inner child healing and shadow work and like integration. Like there's a lot that then comes to the surface that just by setting this intention now, planting the seed of I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to release the attachment to knowing the answers. All this, the image I'm getting now is a garden, right? It's like you took this handful of seeds that you don't know what they are, you throw them into the garden, and then you just witness everything what kind of seeds they were. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't know that there was that seed and that there was that seed. And you can go in there and have more, now that the things come to the surface, you know how to tend your garden because you know what's in your garden. Then you have an understanding of like, oh, as much as I love, I don't know why the word manipulation is coming.
Yes.
But this is what that's been for me, right? So when I discovered the blooming of manipulation in my garden, I was like, damn, that one feels really good and it's really spicy and it has this thing to it. And I was like, yeah, but it's kind of overgrowing the rest of the garden, And it's but what's beautiful, it's like it's not I'm viewing that as like this bad thing about myself that I have to take it out like a weed, because weeds are actually very beneficial to our ecosystem. But whatever, that's another topic.
Yes.
But now I get to be as the witness of saying like, wow, manipulation exists in my garden, and I get to see where it exists in my garden, meaning where in my life it exists, and then as I start to get to know it, I come to understandings of why it's in my garden, right? What roles, how has it helped me? How has it held me back? And so as the gardener, as the witness, I can now choose. I can leave it there and be like, and really own it and be like, that's just my life path. Sorry, you guys, that's what I'm going to do. Or I can, trim it a little bit, or maybe replant it in a different part of the garden that it has more synergy, right? Where its ecosystem is a little bit better. Like manipulation, like I actually, as a shaman and a medicine woman, I need to be able to tap into the energy of manipulation, which is working with matter. Like that's an important skill for me to have, right? But manipulating in a romantic partnership, it may not lead to the type of romantic partnership that I want, right? And so it's not until we throw those questions out there and we start to see what exists, then we can address it and we can replant things and shift things. But yeah, that was the image that was coming in.
Yes, I love it. It's so good. So good. So good. Okay. If it's still alive, I'd love to dive into those things more, like the inner child work and the shadow work as we get into the second episode here. And to wrap up this first part, episode Episode 14?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah, 14, 13.
That's what you said.
That's why I said good.
That's what you said. I don't know if that's correct, but that's what you said.
What I said earlier is correct.
Okay.
Episode 14, yes. Yeah, I'm mindful of the time, so at this point we have another hour.
Perfect.
So with that in mind, will you share a taste of Ksandra now? Like we had a little hint of that from the beginning, a hint, and then we had a lot of what made Ksandra who she is today, some pivotal stories, and we really have very little to no idea of Ksandra now. Right now. And then if you want to provide ways for listeners to connect with you, please share that as well.
Perfect. When you ask me of Ksandra now, it's even like, I am constantly evolving, literally once a month.
Yes.
And I just went through another evolution that I think what I want to share is where I have arrived in the last 3 years. Meaning, there's something there that wants to come in, and then literally where I am today, because even after I leave this recording and I go home, there's going to be a new version of me.
Yes.
And
which is what happens when we allow our experience to, when we're having, and when we're allowing, when we're allowing our experience to alchemize our just moments before self. That means that the next self is new.
So let me see what wants to be shared. Oh no, they're actually, I'm being guided to share who I am in this very moment. In this very moment, I am an individual that has said yes to another monumental shift in life. Where before, like I said, I had 2 Phoenix evolutions, and this is another one of that, but there is such a feeling of conscious co-creation with it, and a level of surrendering to the changes that are happening. So I find myself again where,
as opposed to like a being pulled into,
as opposed to like life just happened to me. Like my last evolution, even though there was a level of healing and awareness, I still left for a few years with the story of, I lost my marriage, I lost my home, I lost my business, it was still, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not wronging that at all. But I had to really navigate through that story for about 2 years before I could reach a true profound space of healing and surrendering and acceptance. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, because that shift has now allowed me to where I am now, and now this opportunity for this next evolution that's happening, right? And so I am shifting where I live. I am adding, or kind of going, adding to my workload, a teaching career that I left 10 years ago or 12 years ago. There's an opportunity to weave that into the practice that I've built. But going to a new city now requires me to build a whole 90% of my practice all over again, right? I'm going into a partnership that I have literally been asking for since I was 17 years old. I am now 43 years old. And it is scary and amazing at the same time. I'm building new community, right? There's an opportunity now to build new community. And I've also have said yes to motherhood, which is something that a while back I had come to piece that I just wasn't going to be a part of my life. And now it's like, oh my God, no, this is, I'm actually really opening myself to this, right? So in and of itself, it is a phoenix evolution. Every aspect of my life is about to change in the next 8 weeks, right? And so where I am, though, is I still had, I was really excited, right when it started. And then I went through those moments and those stories of like, oh my God, this is too much. This, I don't know how, like I told you, right? When we when we make those shifts and have those exposures, there is that initial like contraction of like, I don't know what to do. And this is too much. And am I making the right decision? And, right? And so what I've learned now and embodied now is to be okay when that part of me comes up. That part of me deserves to be validated, deserves to be heard and held and loved, and that in me and being in that space has wisdom for me. So if I just sit with that part of myself and just allow her to be, she will actually give me wisdom and insight to maybe some questions that I might want to contemplate, some boundaries I might want to set up, some foundational things I want to look at, some stories and beliefs that are still there. So she has wisdom. She's given me insight, right, to what is still a part of me. And then by doing that, it has allowed me to move through those contractions easier, and what for me feels like more grace and more space. I can breathe and move through it. And now I'm also have the ability, or the work that I've done is to be able to communicate that very vulnerably to my partner and to my friends, because I can communicate that to myself. I can own that, right? I'm sitting with that part of myself. I'm allowing that part of myself to show up and be vulnerable to myself, which I didn't think that was something that is important to do. And it is, it really is. Because when I can be honest and vulnerable with myself, I've learned how to also now be vulnerable and honest with my partner and my friends and my family. And even regardless of how they react, I can hold that. I've learned that I can hold myself and I can hold their reactions and responses, right? And so, yeah, it's just, I've now arrived in this space where I'm at my 3rd Phoenix evolution, and I've gone through all the feels, and I know I will continue to go through all the feels, but I'm now, because I've cultivated such a deep relationship with myself and really leaned into embodying compassion and unconditional love for myself, that I can hold those different parts of myself as they come up. I have a lot of people, and I did this myself too on this journey, who say, can you teach me how to not be triggered? And I kind of give this like little smile and a little nod, and I say, that's never going to happen. I'm going to be honest with you. It's never going to happen. And I said, because...
And you don't want it to.
And you don't want it to. You don't want it to. Because I'm like, I don't think that our human experience is supposed to be that we learn how not to feel. Because I don't think that that's what the human experience is. The uniqueness, one of the uniqueness, I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to go with it.
I like it.
Yeah, uniqueness of being human is that we get to feel. We get to have emotions, right? And I do feel that animals and plants do have emotions. I'm sorry, but I do. But but there's an understanding that there's a different type of interaction, right? That we, like us feeling emotions versus animals and plants feeling emotions, creates a different life experience, right? So there's a uniqueness in us being able to feel the spectrum of the human emotions. And it is in learning how to feel, how to hold, how to understand, how to move through those things, which I've learned over time. Like I've learned practices that are both cognitive, so like a cognitive way of processing through something, and then embodiment, meaning more somatic and visceral way of processing through something. I think that that's really what the human experience is that we get to lean into the wisdom of our emotions, learn how to sit and dance and co-create with them. And in that creates the alchemy of life that allows us to get to know ourselves better, allows us to experience life in a different way. Like it's enriched my life in so many ways that I never thought possible. Like at 25, I just felt like a little like I was just living through life, just like a robot, just doing the thing and going, punching the time clock and the time card. And now, even though, yes, I, in a sense, have a time card because I have my own practice, there's such a richness that I get to experience life now, and in all aspects of it, from the extremely challenging, like my heart just feels like it's wrenching and someone's sitting on it, to I'm feeling anxious, to I'm feeling anger, like anger is just consuming my entire body, to ecstasy is consuming my entire body, bliss is consuming my entire body. And I've learned how to be able to hold that full spectrum with detachment, though, not with identifying with my emotions, but it's like, oh, I'm experiencing and co-creating with this emotion right now. So it's a very different place that I've now arrived, going through this now, third Phoenix evolution. The second thing that wanted to come in is like, the last 3 years, every month I've been going through what I would call a death rebirth process. Other words are like, sometimes dark night of the soul. I think that's another component of it, or a shamanic transmutation, and basically all of these shadow aspects of myself or unintegrated parts of myself. Once a month, one to 5 of them would show up, and it would be like, okay, here we go. And then sitting with them and moving with them and, getting feedback and reflections from life and my relationships and stuff. And just learning, I just sit as a witness, and I do gentle gentle reparenting, I should say, with those parts of myself. And so, for the last 3 years, it's just been this constant, every month something new has come up. And in that, I've just been able to now manifest the type of relationship I've always wanted with myself, the type of relationship that I've wanted with my parents, the type of relationship that I've wanted with deep friendship and community, and now with a partner. And it's not all perfect at all, but there are enough things now on the tapestry that I really feel that I'm thriving in my life, regardless of what's like coming up. There is this sense of really deep empowering and anchoring of myself, so that when things come up and I do get triggered and I do get overwhelmed, it's a very different lens that's perceiving the experience, and then is able to respond, and I still do react sometimes. That does happen.
No, you're perfect. Stop ruining my illusion.
Especially when I'm hangry. Like, hangry is a real thing.
That is a real thing.
It is a real thing. And it's nice to have a boyfriend who reminds you about that, because I forget that I'm hangry. And then I get angry that I was pointed out that I'm hangry.
I gave Brandon forewarning. I'm like, look, if I'm upset, the first, good idea is give me food. Like that's almost always the best idea. Just give me food.
Just give me food. Yeah. Mine is, if we're in person, give me a hug and tell me I need to eat. I want the hug first.
Yes. Yes. So you're relocating.
Yes.
Do you want to share?
Yeah. So I'll be,
because that'll affect how you're seeing.
Yeah. So I will. Do you want me to go into that part now? What I offer and where I'm going,
yes, and how to connect with
me. Beautiful. Thank you. So I will. Starting February 15th of 2025, we'll be relocating to Atlanta, Georgia. I will need some time there to set up seeing people in person. So my services can be offered both in person and on Zoom. So I have different I work within containers. And so I'll see an individual for the first time for like an a la carte session, as I call it. I also do a free 20-minute phone consult, so we can get on the phone and just understand some of your goals, and then see if I potentially could be a good fit for the journey that you're on. And then we'll have an initial session, depending if you're in Atlanta by then, in person or on Zoom. To the initial session can be anywhere from 90 minutes to an hour to 90 minutes. And in that, I will weave in, depending on that initial call, elements of shamanism and tantra. And even in plant medicine, I work with the spirit of the plant. You know, I can weave in the wisdom and help an individual connect with that, right? And then after that, if we feel an alignment to continue working together, I offer containers, and the containers are about 6 to 8 weeks long. It's an opportunity to continue the momentum in where we are already moving through, and so that it's like more of an intensive. And so there are 2 different types of containers. One that incorporates intuitive life coaching the 3 days before a session and then 3 days after a session. And then there's another that's a little bit more intensive, which is daily intuitive life coaching. So we're really deep diving into a subject. So
wow,
yeah.
Daily connection.
Wow. Daily channeling, daily accountability. It's pretty deep, and I love it. Something that I want to share with it right now is I had a mentor, and someone asked a question about, like, you know, how do you put your services together and what do you charge and this and that. And her response was the greatest response ever. She's like, I have one question back for you. She goes, how does it turn you on to offer your gifts? And I was like, oh my God, yes. And there's something that I love about really being given the honor and the opportunity to hold someone so deeply in a space of vulnerability that's literally going to be life-changing for both of us. Like the honor, to be given that honor and that opportunity, just literally, like, my cells just liquefy in this warmth, and I'm like, oh yes, like please give me that. And so that's where I was like, containers. That's what we do, you know. We're gonna go into mentorships or containers. So anywhere from, like, if a person is wanting to do inner child healing or shadow work or integration work, you know, sometimes people come to me because they've done plant medicine ceremonies with someone else and they need help with the integration. I also sit with them. To someone who wants to develop deeper in their psychic abilities or the gifts that they have, and so they want to, like, learn more of those tools to incorporate from themselves or possibly for their career, you know. So I call those more like my mentorship programs and stuff, and those again can also be done online and in person. So right now, the easiest way to get a hold of me would be on my social medias, which would be Ksandra Roehr. Ksandra has a very unique and beautiful spelling, though, which is Ksandra, and then Roehr, Roehr.
That just happens to be your last name.
I know, right? And so the
awesome.
name of my business is Hear Me Roar.
Yes.
Yeah, which I love my last name. I'm very grateful to my grandfather who brought that name over. So yeah, social media is Ksandra Roehr. Website is Hear Me Roar, like to hear, Hear. And then .com.
HearMeRoar.com. Ksandra Roehr on Facebook
and Instagram. I do have a YouTube channel that's also Hear Me Roar. Let's see how else.
And we'll list all of these
stuff,
things.
Yeah.
Just
I will send
me anything.
I'll send you. You can put it all. I will say, so on my website you'll see my phone number, and it will also say on my website that the easiest way to get a hold of me is through text.
Meaning, don't call her.
Yeah, because I won't answer. I'm a very rare business owner. Like, when I told my friends who answers every single phone call that comes in, no matter what, she's like, wait, you don't answer your phone all the time? I'm like, No, I'm not going to end. Well, first of all, I'm sorry, you guys, but my life does not only revolve around my career. It just does not. That would be so unhealthy for me, and I would be of no service to anybody. And second of all, because of the type of work I do, I wouldn't want to be at the grocery store answering your call. Sure. What if that's the time you have, or you finally built up the courage to call me, and now I can't show up for you? Even if it's just a simple question, And so I want to make sure that I've carved out time for an individual, even if it's just for 15 minutes, to be like, okay, I'm fully present with you in this moment. Let's figure out if I'm a good match for you and you for me, So text me. Yes. Don't call me.
And if people are just wanting to learn more about you, they can watch your YouTube.
Yes.
They can look at your content on Instagram. They can see on Instagram and Facebook events that you've hosted in the past. Events. You have a couple of events this month?
I do have a couple of events in January. They haven't been solidified yet, but most of the events that I have right now in St. Louis are around the cacao ceremony, sound baths, working with rape. So those are more the events I currently do. And then I do have other private shamanic ceremonies that I can also work with individuals and stuff. So,
yay! Yay! So good. Yes. Lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this wraps up the first half of this conversation. We're not going anywhere. We hope you stay with us. How gimmicky can Rose get in 40 more minutes? Stay tuned to find out.